Imagine this. It's lunchtime. The school bells ring and students rush out of the classroom, laughing and chatting as they look for a place to sit. You do the same. You take out lunchbox. Inside is your favorite meal. Not because it is expensive, not because it looks perfect, but because it tastes like home. Maybe it is your grandmother's favorite recipe. Maybe your mother woke up early to prepare before you come to school. Or maybe every bite reminds you of your family, your culture, and the place you call home. You smile. You slowly lift the lid. Before you even get to take your first bite, someone wrinkled their nose. Someone's laugh. Another person say, "Ew, what is that? Why does it smell like that?" Within seconds, everyone is looking at you. Some laugh, some stare, and some whisper to each other. The food has not changed, but somehow the way you feel about it has. You quietly close your lunchbox. You tell your friends, "You know what? Maybe I'm not that hungry today." But the truth is, you're simply trying to hide. The next day, you ask your parents not to pack that meal anymore. Not because you stopped loving it, but because you are afraid of being judged. Now imagine, the lunchbox is yours. It carries more than food. It carries your memories, your family, your tradition, your identity. Would you still feel proud enough to open the lunchbox? Or would you slowly begin hiding the very things that make you who you are? Unfortunately, for many people around this world, this is not imagination. It is reality. Today, I'm not here to talk about food. I'm here to talk about something much more important. I'm here because I strongly believe that people are more than stereotypes we place on them. And if there's one message I hope stays with you today, it is this. Before we judge, let's be curious. At first, this may seem like a story about lunch, but I do not think it is. Because nobody has ever been hurt by a bowl of noodles. The real problem begins the moment we see something different and immediately decide that this is strange. Think about it. How many friendships have we missed because we judged before we understood? Or how many stories remains untold because we never took the time to listen? Every person we meet carries a story shaped by family, culture, tradition, or dreams. But instead of discovering that story, we often stop at our first impression. We notice the difference, we make assumptions, and before we know it, we have judged someone we have never truly met. Children are naturally curious. When they see something different, they ask questions because they want to learn. But somewhere along the way, curiosity becomes judgment. Question become assumption, and differences become barriers. Who taught us that difference means strange? Maybe the problem has never been our differences. Or maybe the problem is just that we stop being curious. And that's exactly why I'm standing here today. Not because I have the answers, but because I have experienced what happens when curiosity disappears. As many of you know, I come from Sabah. Whenever I tell people where I came from, I often hear questions like, "Do you live in a tree house? Do you have internet access there?" At first, I laughed. I knew most people did not mean any harm. So I smiled. I answered the question and moved on. But after hearing the same comments over and over and over again, I realized something. Many people already had an image of Sabah before they had ever visited it. Before they knew anything about me, they knew my story, and that was what hurt the most. Not the jokes, not this question, but the assumption. Because assumptions are powerful. They decide who people think you are. Before you even have the chance to introduce yourself. Imagine walking into a room where people think you already know you. Before they know your name, before they know your dreams, before they know your ability. Would you feel like that? Would you feel accepted? Or would you feel like you constantly have to prove yourselves? That was exactly how I felt. I often found myself explaining Sabah more than introducing myself. I would tell people that Sabah is more than what we imagine. We have modern cities, universities, technology, talented people, beautiful cultures, just like anywhere else. I love sharing my culture. I love telling people about Sabah, but I wanted people to ask because they genuinely wanted to learn, but not because they already believe in a stereotype. One day, I asked myself a question. How many people have I unknowingly done the same thing to? How many people had I judged before I even realizing it? Maybe because of the way they spoke, maybe because of the accent, or maybe because of where they came from. That question changed me. It made me realize that stereotypes are not always created by hatred. Sometimes they are simply created by ignorance. We may not intend to hurt someone, but our assumption still can. Remember the lunchbox? Imagine that students once again, after being laughed at, they stop bringing their traditional food. And later, they will stop speaking their native language in public. Eventually, they begin hiding pieces of themselves. Not because they are ashamed of who they are, but because they are afraid of being judged. And if enough people begin hiding who they are, what kind of the world are we creating? A world where everyone looks the same, talks the same, acts the same. Is that really the world we want? I don't think so. Because I believe our differences were never meant to divide us. They were meant to teach us. Think about it. Everyone in this room had the same culture, the same language, the same tradition, the same food, and everyone had the same way of thinking. How much could we really learn from one another? Probably not very much. Our differences are not obstacles, they are opportunities. Every culture carries wisdom, and every tradition carries history. Every language tells a different story, and every person carries a life that deserves to be understood. The problem is, we often stop listening before the story even begins. We hear an accent and we make assumptions. We see the traditional clothing and create labels. We notice something unfamiliar and convince ourselves that we already know that person. But how can we truly understand someone if we never give them the chance to tell their stories? That's why I keep coming back to the same message. Before we judge, let's be curious. Curiosity asks, tell me more. Judgment say, I already know. One build bridges, the other build walls. Curiosity helps us understand, while judgment keeps us apart. Perhaps the opposite of prejudice is not simply tolerance. Perhaps it is curiosity. Sometimes we think we change the world requires something big. We think we need new laws, new policies, or powerful leaders. Those things are important, but real change often begins with something much smaller. It begins with a conversation we have every single day. It begins when we choose to ask instead of assume, when we choose to listen instead of label, when we choose to understand instead of judge. As Nelson Mandela once said, no one is born hating another person because of their skin color, his background, or his religion. If prejudice can be learned, then understanding can be learned too. If stereotype can spread, then kindness can be spread as well. And every one of us has the power to choose which one we pass on. For Ryan, I want you to imagine the student with a lunchbox one last time. This time, they open it. They pause, waiting for someone to laugh, waiting for someone to make a comment of the food. But instead, someone smiles. Someone moves their chair closer. Someone says, "That smells amazing, can I try some?" The student smiles back, not because the food tastes different, but because for the first time, they feel accepted. At that moment, the lunchbox is no longer something to hide. It becomes something for us to share with one another. And that is the kind of world I hope we can create. A world where people are not judged by their culture, their accent, their appearance, or where they came from. A world where differences are not feared, but celebrated. If there's one message I hope all of you can remember after today, it is this. People are more than labels we give them, more than stereotypes we heard, more than assumptions we make. I know this because I have experienced what it feels like to be judged before being understood. This experience did not make me angry. Instead, it taught me something very important. It taught me to listen before I assume, to ask before I judge, and to understand before I decide anything. Because every person has a story, and every story deserves to be heard. So the next time you meet someone who looks differently, speaks differently, or comes from a different culture, don't ask yourselves, what are they different? Instead ask, what can I learn from them? Because every meaningful friendship, every stronger communities, and every more inclusive society begins with one simple choice. Before we judge, let's be curious. Sometimes changing the world does not begin with a grand speech. Sometimes it begins with a lunchbox. Thank you.